Doug is an everyday man who chooses to spread God's teachings by becoming a priest. One day, after finishing his usual sermon, Doug leaves the church to meet up with his parents. As Doug's parents greet him from across the street, their car suddenly blows up. Doug watches helplessly, but the filmmaker decides to save on their budget and replace the burning car scene with a text instead. After that incident, Doug expresses his sadness while Father Stewart tries to console him. Stewart tells Doug that dead parents are normal because that is what they always do. Doug starts questioning his faith and wonders why God decides to do this to his family. Stewart reminds him that God must have a reason unbeknownst to them and that God has a plan for Doug. After that, Stewart advises Doug to embark on a journey to a place where God won't follow. Therefore, if Doug finds God in that place, it will prove that God is within Doug. Doug takes Stewart's advice to heart and drives to where he thinks God won't follow him. After driving for quite some time, Doug somehow arrives in China with only his car. Upon arriving at the make-believe China, signified by a large yellow text, Doug sees a Chinese woman running through the trees. At the same time, a black ninja is also chasing the woman. The ninja then shoots an arrow and manages to hit the woman's chest. Doug rushes to the wounded woman, but she is too far gone. The woman gives an ancient dinosaur tooth to Doug. She asks Doug to destroy it, but Doug can't understand Chinese, so he assumes the woman is asking him to keep it. With her last breath, the woman somehow speaks English and says the dragon warrior before she passes away. Doug examines the teeth he got from the woman, but the ninja catches up to him. In a panic, Doug tries to run, but the tooth on his hand suddenly wounds him. Doug slowly loses consciousness because of the wound and then falls to the ground. Doug wakes up with a heavy breath while covered in sweat. He then recounts his bizarre experience while traveling to China to Stewart. After hearing that, Stewart tells Doug it was all just a fever dream and brushes it off as typical Eastern superstitious. After delivering Doug's food, Stewart awkwardly hugs him and walks away. After Doug is left alone, he feels an insatiable hunger brewing in his thought. Doug then anxiously leaves the church and wanders outside. On his way, Doug coincidentally passes by a good-hearted call girl named Carol. That morning, Carol goes to meet with her pimp, Frankie, who treats and disrespects her harshly. Later at night, Doug finds himself hiding in a dark corner. His whole body begins shifting in a monstrous painful manner while his eye also turns similar to a reptile. Soon after, Doug roars in the middle of the night. At the same time, when Carol walks home through a dark street, a robber suddenly emerges from the dark and tries to mug Carol. But then, Doug also shows up in his Velocipastor form and attacks the robbers. The robber tries to fend off the cheap-looking raptor by shooting it several times. Meanwhile, Carol watches in horror as Doug tears the robber alive. Ultimately, Doug wins the fight and defeats the man. The following morning, Doug wakes up in Carol's bed without knowing what happened last night. Carol then walks into the room and tells Doug that last night was amazing. Doug thinks Carol refers to a wrestling session between them, so he tells her it was just a one-time thing. They have no idea what the other refers to, so their conversation becomes weird. Doug asks Carol how he was last night, and Carol explains that theirs was a bizarre experience. Carol explains that it all happens too quickly and is too scary for her. Doug gets the wrong idea and feels insecure after hearing that. He tells Carol that he is a priest and he shouldn't do it with Carol. Because of that, Carol realizes they were referring to two different things all this time. Carol then explains to Doug about him turning into a dinosaur and eating a robber alive last night. Doug is shocked by the news and won't believe what Carol said. But then, he remembers having some nightmares and a lust for flesh. But still, he doesn't believe what has happened and denies everything Carol said. Therefore, Carol offers to show him his victim's body that she hid in the forest last night. Doug agrees but asks Carol if she has something he can wear. After that, Carol and Doug, who wears a cute orange dress, arrive at the forest. When Carol shows the robber's body to Doug, he freaks out. Doug asks why she hid the body, and Carol tells him that she is a call girl and doesn't want to get arrested because of this. Knowing that Carol is a call girl, Doug feels much more confused. After that, Carol tries to convince Doug that this is not a curse for him. Because Doug has saved her life, he may be meant to be a hero after all. Carol mentions all the scum who confessed to Doug all these times, but Doug can't do anything about it. Therefore, with Doug's bizarre power, Carol tells him that he can punish sinners with it. However, Doug can't accept the truth just yet, and he decides to run away back to his normal life. Later that day, Doug arrives at the church for his confession shift. Luckily, he manages to change his uniform instead of wearing the cute orange dress earlier. Inside the confession altar, Doug hears a man confessing about stealing candy from a baby and throwing the baby into the river. It turns out that the confessor is Frankie, the pimp. Frankie tells Doug about all sorts of crimes he committed. Suddenly, Frankie confesses about ending the life of two elderly couples with an explosion in front of this church. While Frankie brags about his misdeed, Doug becomes agitated, knowing that Frankie is the one who ended his parents. Doug half transforms himself into Velociraptor form and interrogates Doug. After that, Doug scratches Frankie's neck and ends him. After avenging his parents' death, Doug goes to Carol's place. He tells Carol that he agrees to use his power to punish criminals, just as Carol suggested. However, Doug asks Carol if he can still work as a priest while masquerading as a raptor hero. Carol tells him that he can, but they need to make rules to limit Doug's power only to punish bad people. Doug then confesses that he ended Frankie, the man who ended his parents. Upon hearing Frankie's name, Carol hugs Doug and thanks him for defeating the scum that treats her harshly. Carol decides to help Doug to understand more about dinosaurs, and in exchange, Doug teaches her about the way of God. The two of them get to know each other more as time passes. Doug trains his physical capabilities while also learning more about his power. He spends his time as a crime-fighting raptor man and living up to the title of the Dragon Warrior. Ultimately, the two get closer and form a romantic connection as a crime-fighting duo. Meanwhile, a group of ninjas led by Wei Chan learns about Doug's actions. After that, one of the ninjas named Sam tells his master that Doug's activity has disturbed the money flow for their organization. Wei Chan then assures his ninja assistant that nobody can stop their drug ventures once they defeat the Dragon Warrior. On the other side, Father Stewart notices Doug and Carol getting closer. Because of that, Stewart confronts his fellow priest and warns Doug about his behavior. Stewart also tells Doug that his relationship with Carol is in the way of their work. Doug tries to defend Carol, but Stewart reminds him of his chastity vow. Doug then confesses about his current circumstance to Stewart, but Stewart doesn't believe his story about transforming into a dinosaur. After Doug fails to convince his fellow priest, Stewart tells Doug that the church will perform an exorcism for him. Doug sits in his room, contemplating his life. In a flashback, Doug remembers how his parents had supported his decision to become a priest. Meanwhile, Carol waits for Doug, who doesn't show up or notify her of his whereabouts. Later at night, Stewart explains that it is too complicated to perform a formal exorcism because of the bureaucracy with higher-ups. Therefore, Stewart finds an alternative and brings Doug to a local exorcist practitioner who happens to be his old friend. Upon arriving at the place, a man named Altair greets them and asks Doug to tell him everything that happened to him. When Doug is telling his stories, Stewart recounts how he and Alistair were wartime buddies back then, but their relationship now becomes sour. In a flashback, Stewart remembers how he and Altair fought in a make-believe Vietnam War. The two bond as Stewart tells Alistair about his love interest waiting for him at home. Moreover, Altair asks Stewart to name one of his children with his name. That way, when Stewart's child questions the origin of his name, Stewart will have the chance to tell him about Altair, his best friend. Suddenly, a stray bullet pierced Altair's chest, fatally wounding him. When Stewart is about to write a letter to Alistair's parents, his girlfriend somehow shows up in the middle of a war zone. After spawning out of nowhere, Stewart's girlfriend runs toward him. Suddenly, the woman explodes after stumbling upon a trip mine in front of Stewart. You might wonder why this is happening, but believe us, we don't have any idea. After losing his girlfriend, Stewart returns to the States and begins his career in the clergy. While Altair somehow survived the gunshot without any explanation, or maybe the filmmaker forgot about it. Back to the present time, the vibes shift from a war story to a horror setting when Altair and Doug begin their exorcism ritual. As Altair chants his mantra to Doug, the situation becomes tense. Doug suddenly transforms into his half-raptor form and slowly loses control of his body. Because of that, Stewart is frightened by what he sees. Doug then puts his claw on Stewart, wounds him, and leaves the area. Seeing what he has done, Altair laughs like a maniac as if he had released the demon hound from hell. Later on, Carol finds Doug hiding in her room. Doug tells her about everything that happened tonight. Doug goes into a panic because he thinks that he has hurt innocent people on his way back. However, Carol convinces Doug that he is no monster and would never hurt innocent people. The two then kiss, and the wrestling session is ahead as usual. They confirm their affection for each other that night as they become one. In the wild, the feral Doug is ambushed by 3 ninjas. While the ninja team leader explains a complicated plan to defeat Doug, one of the ninjas thinks about his girlfriend, turning the vibes of the story similar to a Korean drama scene. Sadly, all their tactics are no match for Doug because he easily defeats the ninjas when they attack him. The following morning, Doug and Carol lie in bed, holding each other. They suddenly wake up after 3 ninjas break into their room. Surprisingly, the couple manages to defeat the ninjas in arm-to-arm combat. After that, Doug interrogates the ninjas and learns Alistair had tricked him last night. From this point onward, the story somehow shifts into a martial art theme. Meanwhile, Stewart survived Doug's attack with only losing an eye. He wakes up inside Wei Chan's tent while the master sits nearby. Wei Chan reveals to Stewart that his organization is a Templar ninja who fights evil. But when Wei Chan shows their drug business to Stewart, he immediately protests. Upon hearing Stewart's disapproval, Wei Chan ends him. After learning about their hideout from the ninja he defeated, Doug and Carol prepare to confront the Templar ninja. After they arrive at the lair, the ninjas are also waiting for them. Sam confronts Doug and calls him out for not recognizing him at all. In a random plot twist, It turns out that Sam is Doug's little brother. It is then revealed that Sam is the child their family always forgets. Doug tries to convert Sam to his side, but it is all in vain. Sam raises his sword and proclaims that he will draw Doug's blood with the sword of his ancestor. Soon after, the ninjas start to attack Doug and Carol. While Doug struggles to battle his brother, Carol easily defeats several ninjas all by herself. As Sam taunts his older brother, Doug somehow summons Sam's sword to his hand. Doug boasts to Sam that this sword is also his ancestor's sword because he is Sam's brother. Doug then uses the sword to defeat Sam, ending their brothers' rivalry. Meanwhile, after defeating the surviving ninjas summon a tall ninja who appears from the tent. Soon after, the tall ninja uses his sword to slice Carol without resistance. Seeing that Carol has been defeated, Doug rushes to the dying Carol and holds her in his arm. The dumb ninjas don't use this chance to beat Doug but mourn for Carol instead. As Carol's blood pours from her mouth, she tells Doug she loves him the way he is. Dramatically, Doug kisses Carol goodbye. After that, Doug turns his gaze onto the evil ninjas. He transforms into his fully cheap-looking raptor form and defeats all the ninjas one by one. However, Wei-chan appears and shoots an arrow at Doug's leg, forcing him to return to his human form. Wei-chan reveals that Doug is the last of his kind, a human transformed by the Dragon Stone. Now with an anti-venom to reverse the transformation, he can easily put down Doug, the Velocipaster. However, Doug's hand isn't affected by the anti-venom, so he uses it to defeat Wei-chan. In the end, Doug manages to get Carol to a clinic as he now sits in the waiting room. A doctor then approaches Doug and informs him about Carol's condition. It turns out that Carol's dramatic dying moment is useless because the filmmaker tells us that Carol is fine with a big yellow text to emphasize it. After everything they did together, Doug and Carol decide to hunt down the remaining ninjas worldwide. This movie's plot combines a dozen random ideas, resulting in an amusing and unexpected story. But one thing we can learn from Doug is that great power comes with great responsibility. What do you think of this story? Write your comment down below. Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like and comment to help the channel. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.